Welcome very much to the Community IT webinar, our annual Nonprofit Cybersecurity Incident Report. We're really happy to be able to share this up-to-date data with you on the types of incidents we're seeing among the clients that we manage, which can help you be more prepared and able to prevent the most common attacks. Our learning objectives for today are for you to understand the cybersecurity landscape for nonprofits, to understand the community IT approach to cybersecurity, to be familiar with the incident types and data from our 2023 report, which is data from 2022, and to learn basic steps to take to secure your nonprofit. And before we begin, if you're not familiar with community IT, a little bit about us. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support, and we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. Our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. And we are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. We are technology experts, and we are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2022. Let's get started with this discussion of the cybersecurity incidents we've seen over the past year. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Carolyn Woodard, and I am the Marketing Director at Community IT. I will be monitoring the Q&A and helping Matt with his presentation. So Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, great. Thank you for the introduction, all the background. I'm really looking forward to today's webinar, as this is our 5th annual Nonprofit Cybersecurity Incident Report. As Carolyn mentioned, my name is Matt Eshleman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. And in my role here, really responsible for 2 main areas. So one is to oversee our centralized services platform, which we use to support over 200 organizations and nearly 7,000 endpoints. And then also responsible for working with organizations for their technology strategy, a lot of cloud transformation, and cybersecurity. So really looking forward to the conversation today. And I would just really reiterate Carolyn's comments. Please use the Q&A function so that we can have a good discussion, make this a valuable time, and answer any questions that you may have about cybersecurity at your organization.
Great. So on our next slide, we have information. The incident report is coming. I was hoping to have it published today so that you can all download it on your way home, but it'll be another, probably next week. That will be available for you to download it about the same time that we'll have the slides available, the podcast and the video. I also wanted to make sure to mention that we have a playbook available on our website, Cybersecurity Readiness for Nonprofits. And we also have a free 10-minute cybersecurity self-quiz that you can take to assess your cybersecurity stance and learn where you can improve. So those are some resources that we have already on our site, and we will have the incident report available for download soon. All right, so now we are going to start with a poll. So does your organization have cybersecurity insurance? So you can choose yes, no, planning on getting it, or not really applicable. And Matt, can you see that?
I can, yes. So it looks like of the respondents here today, the majority do. So about 60% of respondents say yes, that they have cyber liability insurance, with about 30% saying no, and then the remainder saying not applicable. And so, yeah, I think that's, I think a high rate. Maybe I would expect it a little bit higher. I think maybe a follow-up question, or maybe in the chat, you could respond. How much has your cyber liability insurance gone up in the last couple of years? I know as a managed service provider, our rate renewals went up pretty significantly. Hopefully that increase looks like it's slowing down over time, but it is a challenge for organizations to receive effective coverage in this area.
Okay, so the next poll is, we're going to launch another one. So what cybersecurity controls do you have? So if you have insurance, you probably know that you have to go through this full long questionnaire of what you're doing. And this is a multiple choice question. So any of these things that you've implemented. So you have multi-factor authentication, MFA, You have security awareness training. You have endpoint detection and response. You have SOC/SIEM. You have MSSP. You have penetration testing. You have SSO, single sign-on. You have MDM or none of the above. If you don't know what some of these what this terminology is, that's fine. These are common things that are asked on those cyber liability questions. So we just wanted to know if you know that you have these or don't have this. And we have a question in the chat, Matt, while we're letting people continue to fill this in. What does cyber liability insurance cover?
Great. So cyber liability insurance, I would say, one, it's different than liability insurance. So again, if something gets stolen at your business or something happens to property at your business, there's property and liability insurance for that. Cyber liability insurance really covers loss related to cyber crime. So again, if you have ransomware, if your website is hacked, if your files are encrypted and you have to pay a ransom to get it back, those are all things that cyber liability insurance would cover. And so that would cover paying for things like legal representation, incident response teams to go in and evaluate what happened. It may cover PR if you need to, have interaction with the public about things. It may also cover things like breach notification. If you need to basically tell all of your members that their data was stolen and they may be at a higher risk for identity theft. So those are the kinds of things that cyber liability insurance would cover.
And cyber liability insurance, if you have it, also would step in when you have that incident. So they'll give you who you're supposed to talk to. There's some entities that you're not allowed to interact with if they're some foreign states or terrorist organizations. That is what you have succumbed to. So they're very helpful at that stage. If you do have an incident, they're probably the first people that you're going to call to respond to it. Okay, so Matt, can you see that?
Yes, I can. And it's great. I'm really encouraged that 77% of respondents have implemented multi-factor authentication, or MFA. So that's great. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, people will be encouraged to get that number up to 100%. Same thing with security awareness training. Very good adoption there at 72%. And then the next highest number of folks implementing controls would be endpoint detection and response. And I would say this is really an evolution of traditional antivirus solutions. So again, there's a lot of great sophisticated tools out there that can protect the endpoint. After that, we have penetration testing or pen testing. So we see that as a common security control or feature that people will follow. And that's, again, people trying to hack your network to highlight those vulnerabilities that organizations may need to patch. And then we have folks, about 20% of people implementing single sign-on, which is a way to access multiple cloud resources with one set of credentials, again, giving a better managed way to access information. And then, less than 10% of folks have implemented MDM, or mobile device management solutions, or are using an MSSP, so a managed security service provider that kind of is just focused on security tools, and doesn't look like anybody has implemented a SOC or a SIM. Those are more sophisticated management platforms that allow typically a vendor to take log information from your endpoints, from Office 365, from Salesforce, from Box, bring it all into one platform, correlate all that data, and then be able to identify if there's threats that are kind of moving through the system. So again, great to see that information, and thank you so much for sharing that.
I just want to reassure everyone, if you don't know what all those acronyms are, it's probably like some of the things that Matt were talking about are for really large organizations, very sophisticated organizations. So don't freak out yet.
Yeah. So just wanted to start off with a little bit of an infographic here, actually from Microsoft. This is from Microsoft's 2022 Digital Defense Report. And in here, I think this highlights how think tanks and NGOs are relatively highly targeted by really sophisticated hackers, what would be called nation state hackers. And so I think this is an important realization for nonprofit organizations to understand is, just because you do really good work, or just because you have a great mission, or just because you don't have that much money or that many resources, doesn't mean you're going to be immune from cybersecurity attacks or from cyber attacks. And so this is something where, the data from vendors like Microsoft really shows how much organizations are targeted, particularly in that think tank and NGO space. This is something that we really see borne out in our interactions with the FBI. Nation state actors are not particularly interested in your organization's research and white papers, again, which are ultimately going to be published. These nation state actors are really interested in research and information about the staff that you have that could be used potentially later on as part of an influence operation. Again, this was a helpful realization for me to come to understand why threat actors are targeting these nonprofit organizations in government adjacent positions, because they know that, if you're a researcher at a think tank or a nonprofit, in a couple of years, maybe when the administration changes, you're now going to be in the government. And so they're interested in getting information about you as an individual that could be then used later on as part of a leverage or an influence peddling. So Carolyn, I think can share out that link. It's really interesting reading, and I think again just continues to build our understanding in terms of what organizations are targeted and the method of that targeting and how it's happening.
With this landscape in mind of these kinds of threats against our sector, what did you see broadly in 2022 that impacted the state, like the landscape and the way people are responding?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We've been, community IT has been working with nonprofits in their IT support for over 20 years. This is the 5th year that I've written this report that looks specifically at the cyber security data that's coming in from those 200 clients. And so I think we've developed some good metrics and view on the types of attacks that are targeting the nonprofit sector. I think there is a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt out there that kind of makes us all anxious. And so I think it is important to understand kind of what's actually happening with small to mid-sized nonprofit organizations so that we can design and respond to these threats appropriately in a way that makes sense, that's cost effective, and that's addressing the highest risk. So I will say a lot of the stuff is automated, and I think again with the evolution of AI and how that's being brought into the tech space, right? That's only going to accelerate these kind of automated attacks. It's going to make it easier and cheaper for hackers to design tools to target us. And the same thing on the security side, right? We see a lot of those automated attacks, viruses, malware, all of that stuff is blocked, right? There's a tremendous amount of stuff that doesn't get to you because a lot of these anti-spam tools, antivirus tools are doing a pretty good job of preventing stuff from making its way to your computer. I would say one of the things that we noted in our data from last year is that we saw a number of incidences where it wasn't just the personal account, or it wasn't just the organizational account that was targeted, but it was a user's personal account. And then that personal account was used to, kind of gain backdoor access into other systems. So again, a personal Gmail account was maybe used as the password reset email for an organization's LinkedIn account, or somebody's Facebook account, was used for their organization, but that got hacked through their personal account. And so we're seeing really a blurring of boundaries between work resources, personal resources, and so the same controls that you want to put on your work accounts really needs to extend to those personal accounts as well. And then I would say those account compromise, the email spoofing, the phishing, I mean, it's just continues kind of unabated. I think we've seen some kind of flattening out of the number of attacks reported, and I think we'll look at that data a little bit later on, but I think, we continue to improve the tools that we use, which I think helps reduce that. But unfortunately, it's, it's not dropping significantly, and it's still occurring at a relatively high rate. I think other things in the sector that are driving a lot of the kind of discussion around cybersecurity is cyber liability insurance. And so again, that was part of our question is how many people have it. Over that 5 years at the beginning of our incident report, it was very easy to get cyber liability insurance. One-page application. You didn't even have to say that you had enrolled in anything, and you could get very affordable coverage that would be pretty comprehensive. Nowadays we're seeing policy renewals go up by 50%, 75%, policy organizations not being able to get coverage, and then also needing to actually implement all of those different security controls, multi-factor on everything, multi-factor on your servers in your office, incident response plans, backup plans, disconnected and encrypted backups. And so the market has really just tightened up because of how common cyber attacks have become and how expensive it is to respond to them. And so the cyber liability insurance providers themselves are really tightening up the underwriting requirements. That, kind of jump down to that third bullet point, remote and hybrid work requires updates to policies and trainings. Again, I think we're now firmly in a hybrid work world for most of the organizations that we're working with. We see a lot of organizations that are 100% remote now. I would say the majority of our clients are probably in that hybrid environment, 2 or 3 days in the office working remotely. And I think the policy side of things hasn't really caught up to that. And so, organizations are still kind of grappling with how to manage that from a policy standpoint. And then the other thing I would highlight at the very end there is, we noticed in our data that there was a really big spike in the incidence of wire fraud incidents. And that to me just highlights that, again, fundamentally, this is cyber crime. And for most organizations, if you're not in the think tank space, your highest risk is really going to be, targeted towards wire fraud, gift card fraud, updating payroll information for employees. And that can be really significant. And, the response to that is not just an IT cybersecurity response, but it involves other aspects of your organization in terms of your finance controls, interacting with your bank, the vendors that you use. And so that does require a coordinated effort across many different departments at the organization. But it's something that's really critical because of the actual financial loss that can represent. And I would say it's not uncommon to see 6-figure losses in this area if your organization, falls victim to a wire fraud campaign.
Yeah, we've definitely in the news, you've seen some, nonprofits that just wired the payment to the wrong bank, and then it's gone. So we wanted to go over this, is kind of our chart of our approach to cybersecurity. I want to remind everyone that this is in the playbook, which is available on our website, and I just put the link into the chat so you can download that for yourself. But for today, I'll just run through the layers here. We start with your security policies and your documentation as that lowest layer. Such as your acceptable use policy, which should be part of your employee handbook and should be regularly updated. So Matt was just mentioning our hybrid work environments. If you have not updated your acceptable use policy after going hybrid or going remote, that is definitely something that you need to look at as soon as you can. There's a layer on top of that of security awareness and staff training. So we often say that your staff are your eyes and ears, like they're the ones who are going to see if there's something unusual happening or something's just not the way it's supposed to be, or they're the ones that are going to be asked to make the bank deposit to the wrong numbers. So they definitely need to have up-to-date training. There's the blue layer of things that your IT department, your outsourced IT should be taking care of. These are all ways to lower your vulnerability using common tools and automation, as Matt was saying earlier. And then that top layer is needed if you're working in specific advocacy space that may make you more of a target. If you're a larger organization, you may want to invest in testing your systems, and those tools are quite expensive and they can be overkill for the types of hacking attempts that most of you on this webinar will be facing. So hopefully that's a little bit of a reassurance, but that's how our approach to cybersecurity goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. I think it is, again, it's important really to start with that foundational piece of policy and people. There's lots of technology things that can be done, but if you don't have those foundational elements in place, I think it's really hard to build an effective cybersecurity program. So speaking of some of the, those kind of foundational pieces, did just want to talk a little bit about foundational practices that every organization should have in place. IT policy. I saw there are some questions around if we have any templates, and I would say, yes, we do. So I can, if you drop that note in, I can follow up and provide our IT acceptable use policy template that does include a section around BYOD. So that's bring your own device, or kind of what's the practice around having staff use personal devices to access work resources. So that's an organizational decision that needs to be made. Again, security awareness training, I was really glad to see that high response rate. I think that's the best money that you can spend in terms of securing your organization, is if you can train and educate your staff so that they know how to identify those malicious emails, which is like honestly the vast majority of threats that organizations are going to see, is those malicious messages that are going to trick you into clicking a link, sharing your password, maybe giving away your MFA information. And so educating staff is just absolutely critical and provides a lot of value. Then there's some boring stuff, right? Operating system and third-party patching. This has been a foundational recommendation for a long, long time, and having a regular routine update to be able to deploy those changes and ensure that they're actually happening is an important element of an effective program, along with good antivirus or endpoint detection and response tools, web filtering, and MFA. So these are all things that community IT provides as part of our device management. So for all those 7,000 devices, we are making sure that all of these things are happening, because I think security is really a game of fundamentals. And these attackers are really going to exploit the weakest link. And so again, if your operating system isn't up to date, or you aren't updating your iPhone, you're at risk to being exploited by those different threat actors that are using malware to get onto devices. So again, make sure that for your organization, you can say, yes, we're doing all of these things. And then once that's in place, then you can move on to some of the, the higher level security controls.
I wanted to break in just quickly and say there have been a lot of people asking about templates for documents, and I have put Matt's contact information in the chat. It's also in one of the slides at the very end, so don't worry if you missed it, but you can get in touch with him for some of these templates. And we are working on a resource library area of our website, so we're hoping to get some of these templates up there too. They're just not quite on our site yet.
Great. Well, Carolyn, do you want to talk a little bit about that shift for organizations?
Yes. So, I mean, you had mentioned earlier that the pandemic and that shift to remote and flexible work environments has impacted so much of our nonprofit work life, and of course, also our personal lives. So can you tell us what you're seeing in cybersecurity with relationship to that? Downsizing an office, getting rid of an office, working flexibly, working remotely?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So, that top line here, increasing spear phishing, targeting personal accounts, your home network, that work boundary is now basically wherever you are. And so, we've seen personal accounts be targeted and then used to exploit work resources. There's some pretty famous recent accounts, with LastPass. That whole breach occurred because a senior developer's home network or home device was compromised. We're probably not all dealing with that sensitive of information, but I think it is a good object lesson, that just shows how connected our technology lives are. So, that the hacker, knows your work email address, they know your personal email address as well. And so they will go after both. Not, there's no respect for our work and home boundary. I will also say here that finance teams seem really both targeted and susceptible to fraud working remotely. I think some of that interpersonal connection we lose. I think a lot of that increased automation, is also, I think, exploited by hackers, right? update this wire payment. I'm having a problem with my bank. These are all stories that we've experienced ourselves, and the hackers are using that in order to extract financial gain from us. I talked about it a little bit before, but again, I think this kind of explosion of AI that's come across all of our inboxes, really accelerates innovation for all. So it's not just going to help us write better emails or fundraising appeals, but it's also going to help the hackers write a more convincing email to get you to click on a link that looks like it comes from a partner organization. It's going to help them, improve the scripting that they're using to build some of the tools. So again, it's probably also going to help inform the security systems that are available. So again, I think it's just this increasing sophistication that we're gonna see, in the security threats as well. As I said, we have really good tools in place and available. So again, the tools themselves are great. I have a lot of confidence in endpoint protection, and there's a lot of great stuff out there, but it still needs to be set up, it needs to be configured, and it needs to be managed. So again, there's not a lot of systems where you can kind of just set it and forget it. These technology platforms are really sophisticated and require, staff that know how to use it, know how to follow up. And it's often a challenge for smaller organizations to kind of maintain all of that skill set in-house to use the tools effectively. Yep. And then I think, Carolyn mentioned, this policy foundation, it's a continuing struggle and battle to keep those policy documents up to date. But it really is important to being able to effectively manage and support your organization as, the work style changes, work locations change, and the technology to support all of that continues to evolve. So I think the technology is there, but it's our policy and operations that really need to catch up.
We'll also in the transcript have all of these tools and links included in that as well. All right, so I think next we're going to another poll, which is, after hearing these Matt's kind of brief and overview in the first half of this webinar, how well do you feel your organization is prepared? So you can choose, we're as on top of cybersecurity as an organization can be. You can choose, we're doing a pretty good job and we know it's important. So those are both, pretty big hurdles. The third choice is, we know it's important, but we don't know if we're doing enough. And the fourth choice, and, if this is you, we see you, it's overwhelming. We haven't done much, but close our eyes and hope. And then the fifth choice is, it's not really applicable. We had a quick question, Matt, in the Q&A about tools for training. And I don't know if you were going to talk a little bit later about KnowBe4, if you wanted to just, I put the link in the chat, but if you wanted to talk a little bit about it while the answers are coming in, because that is a great way that you can be prepared at your organization.
Yeah, so I think security awareness training, I think in general is really important. I think we did a webinar on this to kind of talk about some different tools a while ago. So there's 3 things that you can do, kind of take it on your own. We use a tool called KnowBe4 to manage security awareness training. And, I really like that because we can do both test phishing to see kind of how folks are doing, who's clicking on what, and do some scoring there. And it also gives you a really good library of online training resources that range anywhere from like a 3-minute, interactive game to, 15-minute, short training to, little mini series that talk about different cybersecurity topics. And so all of that is kind of wrapped up in their learning management system that gives staff online access to, to those different training resources. So you can track progress and just ensure that it's happening. And we really see progress over time after organizations have made the decision to implement that tool. Yeah, so it looks like we have a little bit of a bell curve here. So most folks, almost 50%, feel like they're doing a good job, feel it's important, followed by 30% say, we know it's important, but we don't know if we're doing enough. And then kind of on the ends there, we've got 14% of folks saying it's overwhelming and we haven't done much but close our eyes and hope, followed by 7% of folks saying, hey, we're doing all that we can, and we feel pretty confident in our abilities. So I think, no matter where you are, I think the cybersecurity world, it's like there's always something new to do, and there's always another change to make. There's always some new threat to respond to. So it is certainly a living and breathing process.
But you're in this webinar, so you're already taking steps. So you should feel good about that.
All right. Maybe we should have had this in the beginning part of the webinar, but just a little bit about the definitions we talk about in our report. So again, threat actor, that's kind of the person. And I think it's helpful to think of it that way, right? It's not just some nameless entity, right? They're actually people on the other side of the computer that are sending you those spear phishing messages that are financially motivated to get you to pay something. So I think it's important to understand that kind of that's what we talk about, right? A threat actor. We have the security incident. So that's whenever we have, the makings of an issue, right? So that's something that could potentially compromise the integrity, confidentiality, or availability of an information asset. Whereas the breach is actually kind of a confirmation that something has actually happened. So something bad has actually happened. MFA, that's multi-factor authentication. Again, that combines something that which is your password, along with something that you have, which is often an app on a smartphone, or it may be something like a physical security key that could count as multi-factor authentication. Single sign-on, again, a little bit counterintuitive, but again, gives us a kind of a managed and secure way to have one really well protected username, password, MFA combination that allows us by policy then to get into the applications that we need. And in larger organizations, this can be great because it can also help remove access to applications. So again, as staff are onboarded, they're granted applications. When they leave, one place to remove access to applications. We have spear phishing, where those are targeted messages that combine some unique information about you and your organization, and where the sender is obfuscated, right? So we don't know, who's actually sending the message. Spoofing, again, would be a similar, perhaps used in conjunction with spear phishing to, again, obfuscate who's sending it, make it appear like it's coming from your own organization or a colleague, to kind of mask the identity of a sender. We have ransomware. So that would be the attack where files are encrypted. Then to get access to that information, you need to pay a ransom, right? And so that, again, comes back to this financial motivation. Typically, that's paid in cryptocurrency because it can be anonymized. And so that's why it's a favorite of these threat actors, is that they can anonymously get paid. And then we have supply chain attacks. And again, that can be an attack where, maybe you're doing everything right for your own organization, but you're working with a partner, or you have your data hosted somewhere, or you're in a hosted system, and that vendor is compromised. And then you, as a result, are impacted. So again, particularly because we have a lot of cloud solutions in place, there can be supply chain attacks that impact organizations, even if kind of you yourself are not have not been exploited, but maybe the vendor that you were using, they had a ransomware attack, for example. So again, a lot of different acronyms and a lot of terminology that I think it's helpful to define and understand. Again, if there's an acronym that you don't understand, put it in the chat and we'll try to define it.
I was just going to say that, pop it in the chat, and a lot of these terms are on our website as well, so you can look through our cybersecurity resources there. But I want to make sure that we have time to go over the meat of the report. Now we have about 15 minutes left, so.
Yeah. Great. Well, yeah, let's dig into it. And we've been talking a lot about kind of the big picture. And so I think it's helpful just to understand the sample size that we are talking about. So as I mentioned, community IT, we're at the end of last year, about 6,500 endpoints. So we had about 500 increase from our sample in 2021. I think other interesting things to note, just kind of as an aside, we drop Windows servers, right? We continue to see organizations move to the cloud, and that's been a big part of our work as organizations move hybrid, migrate to other systems. The number of servers in play is really shrinking. Windows workstations growing, holding steady a little bit. We've had a lot of growth in our Mac support environment. And so, we support, Mac and Windows and, whatever people feel comfortable, most comfortable with to be productive. So that's our sample size that we are, that we're looking at. And I'd say what we didn't include here is kind of all of the alerts that were blocked. And so, right, if we would include all the spam messages that our systems blocked, or all of the suspicious threats that were blocked on the endpoint, it'd be hundreds of thousands of results. And so we're really focused on those kind of security incidents where things caused us to take another look, as a or kind of were submitted to us by end users. So again, you can see there, right, 11,000 targeted phishing attempts were proactively blocked by some of our support tools. Over 1,000 suspicious threats were detected and automatically eliminated. And so we have a lot of those systems and processes in place to block and prevent things from even happening. So again, we can be efficient in our response. So when we look at the cybersecurity incidents, we kind of have broken this apart a little bit to provide some more context. And so here we can see first kind of talking about like high risk threats. So whenever these kinds of tickets come into our system, they get a lot of attention. And so the first one there is we call brute force attacks. This is something we added last year. And so that is a message to us that an organization's typically the on-premise resources are being targeted. So again, if you still have servers in your office, and those are open to the world at all, right? Even if it's remote desktop or you're hosting a web page, those systems are being targeted all the time. And if you have a misconfiguration in your firewall or some other problem, that will show up as just hundreds and thousands of failed login attempts. And so that, really throws a lot of triggers for us in order to react and respond to make sure that we're closing the door, because, threat actors are still relying on, server infrastructure to initiate a lot of attacks. And so whenever monitoring systems detect that, lots of red flags go off, and we have a quick response to identify the problem and put in remediation in place. The next highest number we had here was compromised accounts. And so you see that confirmed, right? We had, I think, suspected in the medium risk, right, was over 250, right? This has become an area where we do a lot of investigation. This number is relatively low, but it's not zero. Even with all the emphasis that we've had on implementing multi-factor authentication, organizations have not been able to do that 100%. And we are actually seeing cases where even with folks with multi-factor authentication, they can be tricked into giving away codes or finishing an MFA request, in an interaction with a threat actor. So we see compromised accounts still occurring at a relatively high rate. Because of the work that we do, a lot of our clients are here in the Washington, D.C. area, in our think tanks and policy area. We do see quite a few of those advanced persistent threat actors. And so again, those are typically nation state entities that are trying to get into policy organizations, again, to figure out what people are doing, and then gain information about the researchers or the individuals themselves. So that's what brings us in conversation to the with the FBI in order to respond to some of those events. Talking about wire fraud, again, we did have a number of cases this year amongst our clients where they were victims of wire fraud. Typically, those are combined with a compromised account. So if an organization has an account compromised in the finance department, typically the threat actor will then use that information to try to update payment information with the bank, or even with other with other partner organizations. Similarly, we are also seeing cases where maybe an organization is interacting with one of their partners, who has been impacted by an account compromise, and so they don't you maybe have a two-step or verification process or a independent channel to verify payment changes, and so they will initiate a change in wire transfer information at the request of a partner, and it turns out that partner account is compromised as well. So that was something that we saw occur a number of cases where there were deficiencies in both the organization's controls and then also at the bank as well. And then here we have kind of the final high risk threat is ransomware, which for us was zero last year. I think for organizations that do have on-premise server infrastructure, this is continuing to be a high threat. I think in the market in general, ransomware is still occurring at a kind of at record levels. I think for smaller organizations that are largely in the cloud, like this is probably not the highest risk that you face, but it certainly is has a high severity if it occurs. And so again, that's how we kind of think about these high risk threats, is to provide a little bit of context, right? So if we look at something where we look at the severity of a specific event multiplied by its likelihood of happening, right? So low severity threats like spam, have a high likelihood of occurring, but they're not going to cause much impact and can easily be deleted or ignored, right? Other threats, like account compromise, have a much higher risk level because of the severity because of the severity that risk represents, right? If your organization's executive director's account is compromised, then it effectively means that the threat actor has access to all the information in your organization, all the emails. And so again, that could trigger a cyber liability insurance claim, may, require a lot of different, reactions for the organization just to respond to that. So, so the things that are in that high risk threat, really we treat with a lot of urgency because of the impact that it can cause. So again, brute force attacks typically mean your infrastructure is being actively targeted. Account compromise means that somebody other than the named or trusted user has access to that account. Advanced persistent threat actors, right? It means the bad guys are in your network are really targeting you. And then wire fraud, again, obviously with significant financial loss there. So so those are the things that we view as really high risk threats. In the medium risk area, we see things like those suspected compromised accounts, and that can be alerts that we receive from our system. A suspicious login is detected or blocked, and then maybe we need to go and investigate. Is that actually the user authenticating from a new location or a new device? So that requires some investigation to rule that out. And then the same thing here with business email compromise or kind of spoofing. So again, those messages that I'm sure we're all familiar with receiving, where it looks like it's coming from your executive director. Can you buy me gift cards? Or hey, I need to update this wire payment information. Or hey, can you update my payroll information? I just changed new banks, and it looks like it's coming from a colleague. So those maybe aren't as urgent or imminent of threats, but if they turn out to actually be successful, then they can move into a different category. And then finally, it's interesting here in the low risk threats, we have things like spam, which we already talked about, being relatively easy to identify and also delete. But then we also have things like malware and viruses, which I would say for us and our customers, it looks like a relatively high rate. I think most of those end up being, kind of pop-ups, or maybe they're the beginning of a scam to try to get you to call a support number and, buy antivirus protection for your computer or something like that. But what we found is that those are relatively easy to address and remediate, and they often don't turn into, an actual active wire fraud or something else. And so we, for as much buzz as viruses get in terms of the common security industry discussion, What we find is that for devices that are up to date, they're patched, they have endpoint protection on it, the actual risk of viruses are relatively low. And so while it's important to have those good foundational tools in place, I like to really make sure that we're focusing on, email protection, identity and account management as strategies, because that's where we see the highest risk related to threats occurring. So if your account is compromised, that's really bad, and that happens a lot more often than we see with for example, a virus getting on a computer or something like that. So you can see, overall we've categorized about almost 940, 950 events across the organizations that we're serving. And as we can see here, those numbers are kind of increasing over time. And so we've got a couple of different breakdowns of the account compromise from that historical perspective that we had. So again, the total number of it is here in the yellow. We've added in, some of these newer lines, right? Account compromise suspected is something we only started tracking relatively recently, whereas the blue account compromise, is kind of continues at a low level. So it's interesting is MFA adoption here was maybe 10%. MFA adoption here, we're probably at 70%. But we're still seeing kind of a similar number of account compromises occurring. So I think this is an area that we need to continue to focus on improving protection on.
I'm sorry, Matt,
actors
to
continue
jump in, but I
evolve.
want to make sure that you get to some of the recommendations. I know we don't run out of time for that. We also have a question that came in. Do you recommend BitLocker be used on end user computers to encrypt the hard drive? And are there risks to using BitLocker?
So yes, I think BitLocker, or encrypting your hard drive in the good way, is a great security practice. It's part of our standard computer setup, and effectively what that means is if your computer is lost or stolen, you don't have to worry about reporting that as a potential data loss, right? So BitLocker encrypts your hard drive, so if somebody else gets access to that device, the data is effectively useless to them. So here's our kind of visualization looking at the number of spam, malware, virus, ransomware, brute force attacks over time. Again, so you can kind of see, spam, I think, kind of had a huge spike between 2018, 2019. Whenever we first started doing the collection, it stayed at a relatively high level, is starting to tail off a little bit. I think that is due in part to just better security tools. We're deploying more third-party spam filtering, which I think is really effective. And I think also people just acknowledging that, hey, I'm going to get some spam and I can just delete it and I don't really need to worry about it. As opposed to malware, again, I think, we saw a little bit of a spike here. I think that was due to some tool changes that we were making. And so we had better tools in place to block and prevent malware from actually occurring. And so, it's interesting, the increase in in reported incidents, I think, is an indicator that things are working as expected. And then again, we've got some of our high priority, high threat issues here related to wire fraud, the threat, the advanced persistent threat actors or nation state actors, kind of increasing over time. So again, the wire fraud one is, I think, the thing that really has stuck out to me as an area that has requires renewed focus. I think because it's not just a cybersecurity control, it's a policy and it's a process control. I think we did a webinar with YPT, your part-time controller, about this, and I think that contained a lot of great information about organizations that are looking at kind of how to protect themselves about this, because it's clear that it's a threat. And if a hacker can ask you to wire them $100,000, like, that's way easier than writing a crypto malware, sending it to emails, getting somebody to install it, having them follow up with you, getting Bitcoin, right? Like it's just easier to ask for money. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of this, focus and energy really go into spear phishing with the ultimate goal of, something as simple as gift cards, or something as lucrative as updating wire payment transfer information, because like I said, it's a lot easier to just ask for $100,000 than it is to get a ransomware award in that amount. So in terms of the analysis, like what do all these numbers mean, right? We got a lot of charts, a lot of tables, lots of different incident classifications. So what do we do with all this information, and how do we take this from, all right, we see these things happening now, how do we respond? So I would say that I think a couple of big takeaways for me. So number one, I think it's really critical that organizational leadership, understands the risks that they face, right? This cyber, incidents is not something that happens to other people, and it's something that happens, every organization is at risk. And again, just because you're a small organization or just because you have a fantastic mission does not mean that you're going to be immune from these threats. You may be more vulnerable to these threats because you haven't implemented security awareness training, or you haven't implemented these automated systems to update your computers and have endpoint protection and kind of all of those things in place, right? A hacker is just looking at you as a dollar sign, right? And so if you can get tricked into giving them $500 worth of gift cards, they're gonna take that. If they can trick you into wiring them $50,000, they will do that. So every organization needs to understand that they're a target. It's financially motivated. They don't really care about you. It's all about the money for most of these threat actors. At the same time, it's not all bad. We're seeing many of the cloud vendors that we're using enabling secure configurations by default. I think it's taken a long time, probably too long, for organizations to do things like enforce multi-factor authentication and implement these other security controls. And so the vendors are leading the way to some extent in terms of making organizations follow these best practices. So we are seeing that happen. Again, Salesforce has required MFA. Microsoft is enabling kind of secure by default. There's a lot of those other actions where the vendors themselves are saying, "Hey, this is important. We're seeing our clients get exploited, and so we're going to take some steps to help ensure that that doesn't happen." All that really is done in service of preventing account compromise. Because again, it's really at the root of so many other bad things, right? If your account is compromised, then that threat actor has access to all of your data. They can impersonate you to your partner organizations, to your bank, to your vendors, to your funders, and that really is a massive risk to organizations. Taking all the steps available that you can to protect your organization or protect your account from that compromise is really the best thing that you can do. Again, have a good managed IT system in place. Make sure that staff are trained and educated to identify these threats, and then finally make sure that multi-factor authentication is enabled, not only on your your work account, but also in your personal account as well, just to understand that that's kind of in play to be attacked as well.
Our learning objectives to understand the cybersecurity landscape for nonprofits, understand community IT's approach to cybersecurity, be familiar with the incident types and data from the 2023 report, and then being able to take some basic steps to secure your nonprofit. So we talked about some of those, but more of them are in the report as well. So Matt, if you want to linger on your contact information, I did put that in the chat. And that's the way that you can get a hold of Matt. And we're having some people in the chat going ahead and thanking you for sharing all of this information with us, Matt. Really, really appreciate it. I understand it's like a ton of information, so we didn't quite have time to hit everything. But really, just thank you so much for your expertise and for answering our questions. And if you are in the webinar now and want to be able to follow up with Matt, his contact information is there to grab some time with him and just ask him your questions and talk a little bit more about cybersecurity, which I know he always loves to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Please feel free to reach out. I've been with community IT over 20 years. I really love the clients that we get to work with. And so if I can help organizations improve their cybersecurity, that's, really, really what I'm here to do. And, I really enjoy that. So please feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any quick questions that you may have.
I don't know if people can stay on. There's a couple more questions that were in the chat. So if you have to go, it's 4 o'clock. I understand. We all have things to do. But Matt, can you stay on for a minute or two? There's a question in here. How do you deal with token theft? If you could take a stab at that.
So I'm not sure if that's like token theft in terms of like physical tokens being stolen, or like talking about the actual authentication tokens themselves being taken. So I think, again, looking at the data that we have, I think some of these techniques like token theft or kind of 0-day attacks targeting organizations, we're not seeing it in the data that for the organizations where we are, working. I think it is more likely that your organization is going to be a victim of, again, a spear phishing attack that leads to somebody giving away their credentials, being tricked into, entering in an MFA code, and then compromising your data that way. So I think for most organizations, those are the types of threats that you're going to be facing. And unless you've already done everything you can to have good foundational controls in place, you've got, MFA, maybe you're using physical security tokens, kind of the 0-day attacks, these kind of, man in the middle token thefts are not the most likely thing to happen. So I'd really, want to understand your organization's risk assessment to make sure, that you're kind of designing the right solutions for the types of threats that your organization is going to face. That being said, I think, making sure that the organization is, implementing good baseline security practices, making sure you've got good auditing and reporting systems in place to identify whenever you've got anomalous activity happening, are all different and important ways to, ensure that you've got good visibility into identifying, when you may have, something like, a token being used in a different location or a different context than you were expecting.
We've still got a few people on. I wonder if you want to flip back to the slide that had some more of the approach, that exactly that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is the
one.
one I feel like I repeat, on and on and on and on, and it's worth doing, because the number one, right, establish an IT acceptable use policy. And why would you do that? And I think it's because it protects against, misguided and misaligned IT initiatives. I think there was in the chat, SANS has a good policy template library, good framework. We've taken that and revised and edited that over time. And I think, being able to understand, right, what are the IT systems that you have in place? What data resides within them? Who's responsible for that? Where do they live? Who has access to all of that information, right? All of those elements are important to be able to define so that when something bad does happen, you've got a little bit of a framework in place to say, oh, okay, so this system was compromised. It had sensitive data in it. Okay, we need to do, these things. Or, oh, maybe that was just our, it just had sample data and we're not really worried about that. And so it's unfortunate, but, we have a different approach. So again, being able to clearly articulate what data do you have? Where does it live? How are people accessing that information? How are we managing permissions? What devices are people authorized to use? How we enforce that control, are all really important steps. And that, you need to have a policy document that can define all of that.
You mentioned earlier about if you're using, your personal email on the Facebook account that's managing your organization account, then having some policies around, well, you can do that. I mean, Facebook encourages you to have to be able to do that, but then you need to have MFA to log into Facebook, even on your own personal account. And so making sure to spell those things out, I think, makes sense.
Yeah. And again, number two, right, we talked about security awareness training program. Again, I really like know before because of those different elements. Like I like to be able to see, who my users are that maybe need a little bit more training or support. I love the online training tools that are available. Our approach, I like security awareness training to be something that's built into the culture of the organization, right? Should be something that folks are doing quarterly in terms of online training, just to get familiar and just to kind of keep up on the threats, and to continue to have new opportunities to learn, because it's not something that you can really do effectively, in one big training once a year if you never really talk about it or think about it. So again, quarterly trainings, monthly phishing, just kind of, make it a part of the DNA of the organization to just, be aware, be attuned to what's going on. And then finally, MFA, right? I mean, I don't think we can say it enough. Um, Make sure that you're using, an appropriate MFA method, right? I think physical security keys is where a lot of organizations are going to be moving to. They're fast, they're really secure, they're hard to spoof, right? It's a lot of great things to like about physical security keys. I think Microsoft is going to be pushing us in that direction, but it still requires users to make that change.
I'm not sure if I remember who said it, but I think it might have been Jada in our other webinar who said that she'd rather have a staff person reporting something that was legitimate and just being careful and suspicious of it, and taking the time to fix that, than to have them not be reporting something that they weren't sure about. So I thought that was a great attitude to take to it. We have one more question, and then we're going to let everybody go. What or how are you folks addressing zero trust models or implementations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we probably have a whole webinar just on zero trust. I think that is, I think there's some amount of jargon in what zero trust means, but I think to me, what that means is fundamentally, right, never really fully letting an account do whatever it wants, without some kind of interrogation of it. So it does mean, I guess in the old way, right, what wasn't zero trust is in your server room, in your office, right? You're in the office, you logged in your computer, done, right? You could get access to everything. You could access anything in the server, and there was kind of that one control point. But once you passed it, nothing else really, kind of stood in your way. Zero trust is kind of this concept of kind of continuous evaluation of risks, and making sure that, before access is granted to any system, there's some interrogation of your account, right? Does everything make sense? Like, are you still on a device that's trusted? Have you recently authenticated? Have you passed an MFA challenge? And again, I think that is important because, by default, out of the box, most cloud solutions, right, you can access any system from any device from anywhere, and there's really no restrictions on cloud access at all. And that's been great, especially as many of us over the last 3 years, right? We're all working in hybrid environments. We're using cloud technologies that we've recently adopted. And so that's made it easy to adopt those solutions. But at the same time, it means that your attack surface area is enormous, right? Because you can, log in from Maryland, you can log in from Virginia, you can log in from Nigeria, you can log in from Thailand, like all the different places. And your organization might not be in any of those locations. And so having some zero trust tools in place can allow you to define, I think, more granularly the, kind of where people can access from what devices. And I think that's probably the big area for organizations to be, aware of, right? Is that if there's no BYOD policy at your organization and people can access and synchronize any work data to their personal device, and then they leave the organization and there's like no way to manage or control that, like that's a massive problem. So I think a lot of organizations are just kind of ignoring that issue exists.
Well, and I think we talked in one of our other webinars about if you're working on a home network where the password is password, and you're in a condo or what have you, essentially on an open network. So we have all kinds of, or at a coffee shop or wherever it is that you're working from. It could be in Maryland, but just not in a secure fashion. So, Well, we thank everybody so much for sticking with us for a couple of extra minutes here while we had Matt. We could ask him our questions. Do encourage you to get in touch with him, and his contact information is on our website, communityit.com. And we have a bunch more cybersecurity resources there. We have the playbook. We will have the incident report. So we just thank you so much for joining us today. Matt, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. We really appreciate it. And we'll let you go on your way. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you.